The air was shattered by the deafening sound of a gunshot. A person collapsed to the ground, sparking widespread concern and uncertainty within the community. The streets, once bustling with life and activity, were now deserted, as if the very sound of the gunshot had sucked the air out of the atmosphere. Hours passed, each ticking away with agonizing slowness, before the police finally arrived to retrieve the deceased individual. The officers moved with a sense of routine, their faces expressionless, as if they had seen it all before. And perhaps they had. After all, this was not an isolated incident. The Asaba confraternity war had been a long-standing, bloody conflict, with numerous undocumented clashes occurring over the past 2 decades. As the authorities departed, the locals cautiously emerged from their hiding places, their faces etched with worry and concern. They reopened their shops, rekindling fires to roast corn, and attempted to resume their daily routines. However, the atmosphere was far from normal. Hushed conversations about the shooting punctuated the air, with whispers of the victim's identity and speculation about the perpetrators. In a hidden bunker, a group of young men gathered, visibly shaken by the day's events. They smoked, attempting to calm their nerves, as they discussed the killing. "Aero Danger Master is gone," one of them muttered, prompting a chorus of vows for revenge. However, beneath their bravado, fear lingered, fear of being the next target, fear of being caught in the crossfire, fear of losing their lives in a senseless conflict. The rivalry between the Vikings and the Black Axe had been particularly intense, culminating in one of the most brutal confraternity wars in recent history, which ravaged the area around 2020 to 2021. The conflict had left deep scars, not just on the bodies of the victims, but also on the psyche of the community. It was a war that seemed to have no end, fueled by a cycle of revenge and retaliation that threatened to consume everything in its path. As the young men in the bunker continued to talk, their voices were laced with a mix of anger, fear, and desperation. They knew they were caught in a trap, a never-ending cycle of violence that seemed to have no escape. And yet, they felt powerless to stop it, bound by a code of loyalty and honor that demanded they stand by their comrades, no matter the cost. The events surrounding the 2020 conflagration between the Black Axe and Vikings in Asaba are shrouded in mystery, with various accounts of what transpired. However, based on the most reliable sources, it is alleged that the conflict was sparked by a long-standing feud between the two groups. The origins of this feud dated back to a previous incident, in which the Black Axe was accused of bringing down an elderly member of the Vikings. The tragic demise of the elderly Viking was said to have been a senseless act of violence, one that was met with widespread condemnation from both within and outside the confraternity circles. In the aftermath of the incident, it seemed as though the issue had been laid to rest, with no further reprisal attacks from the Vikings. The lack of retaliation led many to believe that the matter had been forgotten, and that both groups had moved on from the incident. However, beneath the surface, tensions continued to simmer. The Vikings, though seemingly inactive, were quietly seething with anger and resentment. The demise of their elderly member had left a deep scar, one that would not be easily forgotten. The lack of immediate retaliation was not a sign of weakness, but rather a calculated move, biding their time until the perfect moment to strike. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the Black Axe began to let their guard down. They appeared to have escaped accountability, and the Vikings' inaction had emboldened them. But little did they know, the Vikings were merely waiting for the perfect moment to unleash their wrath. The stage was set for a bloody confrontation, one that would shake the very foundations of Asaba. The question was, when would the Vikings strike, and how would the Black Axe respond? The answer would come soon enough, in a maelstrom of violence that would leave death and destruction in its wake. Time has a way of numbing even the deepest wounds, but memories of past injustices can linger, simmering just below the surface. For the Vikings, the demise of their elderly member by the Black Axe had been a festering sore, a reminder of the violence and disrespect they had suffered. Though they had initially chosen not to retaliate, the passage of time did little to assuage their anger. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the Vikings began to stir, their collective memory of the incident rekindling a desire for revenge. They started to mobilize, quietly gathering intelligence and resources, biding their time until the perfect moment to strike. And then, without warning, they launched a series of targeted attacks against the Black Axe. The Black Axe, caught off guard, were initially unable to respond effectively. The Vikings, fueled by a desire for revenge, allegedly brought down several Black Axe members, exploiting the element of surprise to devastating effect. The Black Axe, reeling from the sudden onslaught, struggled to regroup and strategize, desperate to find a way to counter the Vikings' aggression. But the Black Axe were not ones to back down from a fight. As they regained their footing, they began to retaliate with equal ferocity, launching their own series of targeted attacks against the Vikings. The conflict escalated rapidly, with both sides trading blows and suffering losses. The streets of Asaba became a battleground, as the two rival groups clashed in a maelstrom of violence. The attacks and counterattacks continued unabated, each side determined to assert its dominance over the other. The body count rose, with innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. The people of Asaba lived in fear, unsure of when or where the next attack would occur. The conflict between the Vikings and the Black Axe had become a full-blown war, with no end in sight. The conflict between the Vikings and the Black Axe had already reached a boiling point, with both sides trading blows and suffering losses. However, a new development was about to escalate the violence to unprecedented heights. A disturbing video emerged online, allegedly showing members of the Black Axe executing an individual they claimed was the Vikings' executioner from the Norway Marine Patrol. The video's authenticity was impossible to verify, but its impact was immediate and devastating. The Vikings, already seething with anger and resentment, took the video as a declaration of war. Norway was the most popular Viking deck in Asaba, and the alleged execution of their leader was seen as a declaration of war on their organization. All hell broke loose as the Vikings launched a series of retaliatory attacks against the Black Axe. The violence was more intense and personal than ever before, with both sides committing atrocities that would haunt the city of Asaba for years to come. In a particularly gruesome turn of events, the Vikings allegedly also executed the Black Axe leader in Asaba. The true identity of the executed individuals remained shrouded in mystery, but rumors swirled that one of the victims was known as Omalu. The name became synonymous with the brutality and senselessness of the conflict, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of the violence. As the conflict continued to escalate, the people of Asaba lived in fear of being caught in the crossfire. The conflict between the Vikings and the Black Axe had become a full-blown war, with no end in sight. The city was gripped by a sense of hopelessness, as the two rival groups continued to wreak havoc on innocent lives. The question on everyone's lips was, when would the violence finally subside? The devastating war between the Vikings and the Black Axe continued to rage on, leaving a trail of destruction and death in its wake. In the midst of this chaos, a popular Black Axe member from Benin met a tragic end. Francis, a University of Benin graduate, had returned to his hometown of Asaba, where he had become a prominent figure in the Black Axe. His bold and outspoken nature had earned him both admiration and notoriety, as he never hesitated to proclaim his allegiance to the Black Axe. Francis's daily routine was well known to his friends and foes alike. He could often be found at his favorite beer parlor, a popular gathering spot for locals. Despite the ongoing war, Francis had refused to go into hiding, choosing instead to live his life as openly as ever. However, this bravery would ultimately prove to be his downfall. On his birthday, of all days, Francis's life was brutally cut short. Two armed Vikings, determined to send a message to the Black Axe, tracked him down to his beloved beer parlor. Without hesitation, they opened fire on Francis instantly. The senseless event sent shockwaves through the community, as friends and family mourned the loss of a young man who had been taken from them far too soon. The confraternity war continued to escalate, with both sides committing atrocities that would haunt the city of Asaba for years to come. One particularly horrific incident stood out, as 5 people lost their lives instantly at a single location. The incident was so devastating that it left even the most hardened residents of Asaba reeling in shock. While the perpetrators were never publicly identified, the mainstream media at the time alleged that the Vikings were responsible for the carnage. As the streets of Asaba witnessed a devastating outbreak of violence, the elders of the community could no longer stand idly by. Disheartened by the mayhem and destruction, they decided to take drastic action. In a desperate bid to restore peace, the elders prepared a diabolical spell, cursing anyone who carried out a confraternity hit in Asaba. The curse was said to be powerful, striking fear into the hearts of even the most hardened cult members. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the war came to an end. An uneasy peace settled over the city of Asaba, as both the Vikings and the Black Axe seemed to lose their appetite for violence. While it was never officially stated which group had initiated the peace talks, the result was clear: Asaba was finally at peace. In the years that followed, Asaba remained a relatively peaceful city, with confraternity wars becoming a rare occurrence. The curse of the elders seemed to have had a lasting impact, as cult members thought twice before engaging in violent activities. The city began to heal, as residents slowly rebuilt their lives and their communities. And though the scars of the past would never fully disappear, Asaba had finally found a measure of peace, a peace that would endure for years to come.